The Wonderful World of Darklords. Report 6. Arendelle. I knew to expect the cold when I entered Arendelle, but nothing could truly prepare me for what I felt when the mists became snow. To say that Arendelle is cold is to say that Harakir doesn't get much rain. I felt an odd resistance when I blinked. It took me a moment to realize that the wind first made my eyes water and then froze my lashes together when I closed them. The Arendellians say that ice has a magic that can't be controlled, stronger than 100 men, and when I entered the capital city, I believed it. The winter has frozen the homes and hearts of all who live here, and I doubt that any spring will ever come to thaw them. The Lord. Arendelle was not always locked in ice and snow. Its troubles began years ago at Queen Elsa's coronation. The people call her an ice witch, although from my research I do not believe her to be a literal winter hag. She's far too powerful for a hag without a coven. It seems more likely that she's some form of water genasi or elemental sorcerer. Arendelle has been cut off from the outside world for years, and Elsa herself was something of a recluse until her coronation, giving her little access to outside channels of arcane study and making an elemental heritage more likely. At any rate, an altercation with her sister, Princess Anna, caused Elsa to unleash her powers and plunge the domain into eternal winter before secreting herself away on the North Mountain. When Anna attempted to confront her, Elsa froze her sister to solid ice, then loosed an even greater blizzard upon the realm, ostensibly to punish them for her sister's death, although it seems that Elsa alone bears the burden of guilt for it. To this day, Elsa remains locked in her palace, freezing anyone foolish enough to approach her. Unfortunately, as the shortage of supplies in the capital city drives the Arendellians farther and farther afield to forage, they inevitably infringe upon her solitude and face her wrath. With both members of Arendelle's royal family either corrupted or dead, rulership has fallen upon Anna's widower, King Hans, whose connection to the beloved murdered princess gives him incredible popularity. Some whisper that Hans resents becoming king at the very moment the once prosperous Arendelle became nothing worth ruling over, but if that is the case, I doubt anyone can blame him. Particularly since, regardless of titles, all know that Elsa is the true queen as long as winter reigns. The land. The vast majority of Arendelle is a frozen wasteland. Most of the people have crowded to the capital city to take advantage of the food and supplies that Hans distributes to them, but living in such close proximity is not without danger. With resources so scarce, Arendellians are miserly and distrustful at best, paranoid and aggressive at worst, and hoarding and theft are commonplace. To make matters worse, when the food supplies run low, there are less savory means of finding nourishment. There are no more pets or livestock within the city limits, and I was told that I would be taking my life into my hands by going out alone at night, and putting it on someone else's dinner plate. Recently, Hans has attempted to rally the people against the small community of Firbolgs that dwell in the Valley of the Living Rock, claiming that their magic catalyzed Queen Elsa's powers in her descent into madness. I suspect that it has more to do with the valley's steam vents, which have left the Firbolgs almost untouched by the endless winter. Further proof of collusion to Hans. Rumor has it that Elsa's parents took her to the Firbolgs as a child, so I cannot rule out the possibility that they imbued her with power, but if they do have that level of magical strength, they are remarkably passive. They seem to want nothing but for the humans to leave them alone. Understandable, given the Arendellians' desperate avarice. When I ventured into the mountains to find Queen Elsa for myself, I learned why the people would rather risk the dangers of their fellow citizens within the city than those of the land without. The wind and cold, although terrible, were only part of the danger. Massive snow golems lurked in the wasteland, their bodies concealed by the blizzard until it was almost too late, waiting to snatch up unsuspecting travelers and take them to Elsa's castle. Some of the ice, direct from Elsa's hand, thrummed with necromancy. According to Arendellians, to be struck by one of these fragments was to die in agony. And then, of course, there were the results of her experiments. None of them had survived. But that did not stop them from wandering the landscape, doing the bidding of their frozen queen. Dread possibilities. By using various spells of movement and concealment bestowed upon me by my patron, I was able to infiltrate Elsa's palace, although I doubt I would have been able to enter undetected if she had not been distracted. Her palace was a crystalline marvel, as beautiful as it was cold, much like its mistress. Hundreds of intricately crafted rooms stood empty, silent but for the howling of the wind and the slow, heavy footfalls of her servants. I made my way through the halls of the castle, past enormous snow golems and frost-rimed zombies, making sure to avoid the ones whose eyes were particularly encrusted with ice. I had heard that Elsa granted them powers by targeting certain parts of their body with her shards, and I did not want to risk the possibility that frozen eyes granted eldritch sight that would pierce my magical concealment. At last, I arrived at the icebound heart of the palace. Princess Anna stood on a plinth in the center of Elsa's laboratory, looking for all the world like a perfectly carved statue of ice, and around her were various tables and enclosures, some holding people, others holding ice zombies or frozen statues. The floor was covered in something that I almost didn't recognize at first, as it was so out of place in the castle: liquid water. As I watched, Elsa approached one of the statues and ran her hands over it, only for it to melt beneath her touch. With a snarl of frustration, she moved on to another. This one's limbs jerked into movement, its mouth opening and closing like a fish's, and it rose from its table and shambled to join its fellow undead. I could see from the queen's face that this was not the outcome she had wanted, but after some time observing her, these seemed to be the only two results that she could manage. At last, she slumped at the foot of Anna's statue, looking defeated, and I crept away. I heard a woman's voice sobbing on the wind as I made my escape, not Elsa's. It may have been one of her victims, but the tone was not one of fear or pain. It was of bone-deep sorrow. Parting thoughts. I gave as many of my supplies as I could to the few Arendellians who had helped me before leaving, knowing they would consume them as quickly as possible before King Hans caught them and made an example of them for hoarding. Unless the Firbolgs share their far more bountiful resources with the humans, I can see no happy ending for them, and given their greed born of desperation, I can hardly blame the Firbolgs for not doing so. The only other hope would be killing or thawing the heart of Queen Elsa, and I do not know which of those would be less impossible. I had to make a stop in the blessed warmth of Darkon before continuing on my way to the next domain in my itinerary, as it can only be accessed by sea, and Arendel's ports are locked in ice. I once again found myself chartering a ship, but this one was a skiff small enough for me to pilot myself. Holding a piece of aid as a mist talisman, I prepared to take the helm and chart my own course, taking comfort in the fact that despite the deadly cold of Arendelle and its mistress, I'm still here. Regards, D.
These lands ensure that the denizens within shall never obtain what they truly desire, be it the 13th son who desires to rule his own kingdom, only to be granted dominion over a frozen tundra with vanishing resources, or a sibling who can only grant false life to her beloved sister. Pity that Queen Elsa's powers do not create true life as was rumored, but merely what many referred to as mockeries of life. Golems and zombies are poor substitutes for true resurrection. Can one truly be held responsible for actions performed in grief? For the loss of one's family can break even the coldest of hearts. One wonders what my little servant would have done if her dear brother's sacrifice had not been prevented. Would she toil on with her grief, or be consumed by it, with the guilt of the circumstances that led to his death gnaw at your consciousness? One can only speculate in your case, but the Queen of Arendelle shall continue her experimentation in vain. For what other choice does she have? Even a fraction of a moment in which she may succeed could bring her back her sister and quell her despair.
This has been The Wonderful World of Darklords. We have no affiliation with Disney or Wizards of the Coast. All music recordings used in this episode are in the public domain and were obtained through museopen.org. Titles and links are in the show notes. Dialogue for Yensid was written by Aslan Rex himself, who you can follow on Tumblr at DarklordAslan. The Wonderful World of Darklords logo was designed by Haylight Jones. You can find links to their work in the show notes. If you'd like to support the show, look for us on patreon.com or find our tip jar on Red Circle. Thanks for listening.